This is Censor Studio. Someone cursed at Russian President Putin, and that person is President Trump. President Putin and President Trump have displayed a close, brotherly relationship. President Trump has now publicly expressed anger towards President Putin. Today we will focus on this topic. Let's take a closer look. On July 8th, President Trump harshly rebuked President Putin of Russia, warning him not to speak foolishly. As you all probably know, this is the reason. Peace talks for the Ukraine war, advocated by President Trump, have stalled as President Putin persists in continuing the conflict. It seems that President Trump, very angry, has raised the level of criticism against President Putin. President Trump criticized President Putin with harsh language during a heated meeting he led at the White House. As you all know, President Putin appears to be trying to escalate the war with help from several countries. 30,000 North Korean troops are expected to be sent to Russia soon. As a result, President Trump is taking action. President Trump announced on July 15 local time that if Russia does not end the Ukraine war within 50 days, he will impose smart tariffs. This time, President Trump also stated that if the war is not ended within 50 days, he will impose a 100% tariff on Russia and impose secondary tariffs on countries that purchase Russian oil. We should examine these secondary tariffs more closely. If India keeps importing Russian oil, United States companies importing Indian goods will face a 100% tariff on those items. Right now, oil and gas account for 1/3 of Russia's national revenue and more than 60% of its exports. If implemented correctly, secondary tariffs could significantly impact Russia's economy. Following international sanctions on Russian oil, China and India accounted for approximately 47% and 38% of Russia's oil exports, respectively. Turkey accounts for around 6%, making the economic sanctions ineffective. This is what they aim to prevent. Also, President Trump says he will send 17 Patriot air defense systems, which Ukraine needs the most. A White House official stated that short-range missiles, self-propelled artillery, and medium-range air-to-air missiles will be sold to NATO members, who will then transfer these weapons to Ukraine. However, this doesn't imply a months-long delay in the weapons' arrival. Parts of the Patriot system are expected to arrive within days, indicating swift support. President Trump is not directly supplying American weapons to Ukraine, but rather delivering them through European countries. This indirect delivery method was chosen based on a clear political calculation. According to Cable News Network, instead of the United States directly providing weapons, European countries purchase American-made weapons and then transfer them to Ukraine. It was also reported that this move by President Trump aims to avoid the appearance of the United States going against its previous stance of not getting deeply involved in the war. Analysts say President Trump prioritizes Europe as a strategic approach to bridge the gap between his post-election calls to reduce involvement in the Ukraine war and his recent decision to provide weapon support. This demonstrates to his conservative supporters that he remains prudent with America's resources. By emphasizing Europe's role in providing weapons, he sends a dual message to the international community. Ukraine will not be abandoned, and support will continue. Despite his complex strategy, President Trump is openly disappointed with President Putin. President Trump keeps a friendly tone when speaking with Russia. It is said that Putin speaks gently and kindly, but after ending phone calls, missiles strike Kyona or other cities. After experiencing such incidents a few times, he concluded that conversations are pointless. This statement signals that Trump's diplomatic patience has reached its limit. President Trump has apparently decided to take action after several unsuccessful diplomatic attempts with President Putin, as aggression has increased with no concrete progress toward a ceasefire. Ultimately, President Trump simultaneously utilized dialogue, sanctions, and arms supply, effectively delivering a lethal final ultimatum to Putin. Russia is facing pressure not only from the Trump administration, but also from other sources. The United States Senate is preparing an unprecedentedly strong sanctions bill. This bill is a bipartisan measure being promoted through cooperation between both the Republican and Democratic parties. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, a close ally of President Trump, is at the center of this. Senator Graham is directly leading this bill and has secured as many as 85 senators as co-sponsors. With 100 seats in the United States Senate, over 85% are participating, signifying strong bipartisan support. This also symbolizes that the United States' political warning toward Russia has reached an unprecedented level. This bill includes provisions to impose economic sanctions or tariffs on countries that directly or indirectly support Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as provisions allowing for up to a 500% profit tariff on countries importing Russian oil. Countries such as India, China, Turkey, and Brazil, which continue to trade oil with Russia, may face tariffs up to 5 times the original price when exporting to the United States. This surpasses mere sanctions, signaling a potent economic war against the global supply chain in its entirety. This bill aligns with the independent tariff measures implemented by the Trump administration. President Trump previously threatened a 100% tariff if Russia failed to agree to a ceasefire within 50 days. Meanwhile, the Senate is considering legislation to impose a 500% tariff. Both the executive and legislative branches, as well as both United States political parties, are simultaneously increasing pressure on Russia. If passed, this bill will enable the United States to not only sanction Russia, but also pressure third countries profiting from Russian transactions. Certainly, many voices criticize this measure. The Trump administration and United States Senate are pushing for a strong sanctions bill, but many criticize that it's happening too late. In fact, from the perspective of the actual flow of the war situation and international strategy, there are also questions being raised about whether this will really be effective. The current battlefield situation in Ukraine is unfavorable. In particular, there was an incident last March when the United States government temporarily suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine. During the government shutdown, the Ukrainian military was strategically pushed back on the Russian Kursk front, leading to Russia nearly gaining full control of the area. Moreover, United States weapons support is criticized for being inconsistent. The fluctuating pattern of providing, stopping, and then resuming weapons support is seriously hindering Ukraine's ability to maintain its military strength. Even if Russia is threatened with strong sanctions unless they agree to a ceasefire within 50 days, analysts say it will be challenging to effectively help Ukraine, which is already disadvantaged on the battlefield. Both domestically and internationally, some cynically compare attempting to halt the war with tariffs to giving a painkiller to a shooting victim. Russia is an energy powerhouse capable of self-sufficiency. After over 3 years of war, Russia has established sufficient means and networks to bypass economic sanctions. Russia was briefly impacted when the sanctions were initially imposed, but has now adapted to them. Russia runs an unofficial group of oil tankers called the Shadow Fleet. The system disguises the origin of oil or transports it through intermediary ports to evade Western sanctions, allowing Russian crude oil to continue supplying the global market. The Associated Press pointed out that oil is a commodity that is easy to hide its origin and distribute, so no matter how high the tariffs are, it is actually very difficult to block its routes. Russia is countering sanctions through ties with China, India, and some African and Middle Eastern countries. They have set up alternative financial and logistics systems in anticipation of sanctions. That's why it's uncertain whether the sanctions will actually work. Ukraine and Russia had contrasting reactions to President Trump's forceful comments, military support pledge, and 50-day sanction ultimatum. Ukrainian President Zelensky expressed thanks on X following a call with President Trump. He said he had a very good conversation with President Trump of the United States, expressing gratitude for Trump's willingness to support Ukraine, stop the loss of life, and cooperate to establish lasting and just peace. This exceeds diplomatic courtesy, reflecting Ukraine's desperate welcome for United States rearmament support and clear political stance amidst prolonged war and growing internal fatigue. This can be viewed as a positive response when obtaining advanced defense systems like the Patriot missile is crucial, as the capital Kyiv and infrastructure continue to be damaged by recent Russian missile attacks. Conversely, Russia displayed a completely different reaction to Trump's comments. Russia stated that President Trump's recent comments would not significantly affect its military operations or strategy. Russia stated that peace with Ukraine must be resolved through negotiations between the parties involved, not by unilateral pressure from outside countries. President Trump said he would maintain strict sanctions on Russia, allowing a 50-day grace period. Of course, there seem to be many differing opinions on whether this will actually be effective. Do you think this measure will really work? Please leave your thoughts in the comments as well. That concludes the video. Thank you.